Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome back to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Katie Beth Hand. My guest today is the CEO of LifePulse, where he teaches organizations how to stop just treating symptoms and finally fix their people problems for good. Matt is an in-demand speaker and a two-time #1 international best-selling author. Matt, I know you are busy, so thank you so much for taking time to join me today.
Oh, thank you. Super excited to be here, Katie Beth.
Absolutely. Okay, so Matt, before we dive in with all of our questions, tell me and our listeners a little bit about your background and the journey that really led you to start LifePulse.
Yeah, so it was a complete accident. This is the easiest way I can say it. I always kind of joke, I had no interest in being a consultant, no interest in being a coach, a keynote speaker. All the stuff that we've now become was not necessarily part of my plan. I knew a business owner. That's always been something that's been passionate, but it really started because my wife and I, we were having a conversation. We were just recently married. And she said, man, I knew marrying was going to be hard. I just didn't realize it was going to be this hard. You're crazy. So she asked, she said, how do you do all these things you do? And I walked her through kind of these questions I asked myself every single day. And she laughed and she's like, well, what, can I try? So her and I started doing it together. One thing led to another. We started telling our friends about it. Some of our friends asked if we could come teach to their companies. We talked in front of a pretty big entrepreneur organization down in Georgia. And then somebody connected us with a Fortune 50 company that reached out and said, hey, we got a copy of this little book you guys have. It solves our biggest personnel problem. Could you come teach us? And that was how it all started. So from there, it led to companies like Google and Twitter and the Air Force and Uber, as well as small mom and pops all over the place. It doesn't really matter the industry. People are people, and people aren't the problem, but they have problems. And that's why you have people problems. We've just built tools and solutions that we can offer to customize to the individuals to solve those problems.
That's fantastic. And genuinely, one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on the show is for selfish motivations, because I run two companies and It's from what I'm learning, it's not the people, but we definitely sometimes have people problems. So as we're going through, just know I'm picking your brain for my own benefit as well. So we kind of have our background on how LifePulse got started, which is really cool how organically that came just because there was such a need. Talk to us about LifePulse, the type of coaching that you do, the type of teaching you do, and talk to us about the idea of perpetual development. What does that mean?
Yeah, so what we do is we call it truth-based transformation. And there's a three-part process that we go through that where we expose the gap, we bridge the gap, and then we show you how to sustain the gap. So our coaching is pretty unique. We kind of graduate people down, if that makes sense. We're like a terrible business model, but a great result-driven organization, in the fact that we don't keep people around forever. It's usually 3 to 6 months, and you're going to graduate down to the point where you just get to what we call maintenance mode. You have all the tools, you know what we're doing. And then what we might do is we have other coaches that will pass you along to another coach if you need a new version of it. So that's the concept of the style of coaching. But the beautiful thing is because we use this concept of perpetual development, and every single thing we teach is basically a combination of mindset and a tool to help keep that mindset where it needs to be, we can scale it to whatever size company we want. So anything I teach you, Katie Beth, can work for both your companies and all your employees. So either you can train them, or we give every single one of our coaching clients tools so they can train their people all the way down the line. And it leads us to this concept of perpetual development. And everything we do is about bridging gaps. So the gap here is bridging the gap between intention and structure. And it's the biggest mistake I find all leaders do when they come to implement either a new concept or a new idea, is they don't take the time to bridge that gap. Intention and structure need to be on the ends of whatever you're teaching your people. Otherwise, it will never stick. Otherwise, you're bringing in ideas or new ideas, and it's not going to actually do anything because they're not going to implement it. So let me combine these two. Intention, we define as the purpose behind any goal. That's intention. Structure is a defined and repeatable process towards achievement. We need something that's going to engage intention and use that to start the structure. And the structure needs to cause you to re-engage that intention. And that's how you get that thing that we call perpetual development. The intention leads you to structure, the structure back to intention, the intention to structure, and so on and so on. And we use this formula where it's basically intention plus what we call fuel times structure equals results. That's the formula that we use. The fuel is whatever topic you're trying to teach your people. Communication, management, change management, ownership mentality, whatever hot topic is out there on the whatever time this thing gets posted, the Amazon top 10 will change every week of what now is needed. If you don't have intention and structure, you're missing out on that opportunity. I kind of describe it like a road trip. If you've ever taken a road trip, there's two things you need. One is the fuel, so I guess three, but you need a vehicle and you need a route. The vehicle is intention. The route is the structure. But a route without structure, right, or a route without a vehicle, is what I call a wasted opportunity. Meaning there's a path, but there's no way to get there. A vehicle without a route or intention without structure is wasted energy, meaning you're just driving around aimlessly. So whatever you do, listeners, I don't care what industry you're in, I don't care what level of the company you're in, make sure whatever you are doing, you are bookmarking intention and structure, and you can learn any topic and implement it yourself.
You know, it's interesting, Matt, because that sounds so simple when you first say it comes down to intention and structure. But I feel like in my experience, companies tend to be really heavy on one and never both. So
Yeah.
a lot of the companies that I've worked with and worked for tend to have a lot of good intentions, but not a good structure in place to support that. Or they have tons of structure, but nobody really understands the purpose behind what they're being asked to do. So even though this is a very simple formula, I really love that. It's simple and it's basic, but it makes so much sense. And like you said, it can be implemented across really any industry, any size company.
And any personal or professional issue. And that's the key as to why does that not work at some of those companies you're talking about, is they don't have it hit all three filters of truth, which means whenever we put something out with light bulbs, number one, it has to work in the professional world. That's an easy one. That's what we do for a living. It's got to work with business. But before we actually present it to people, we test it to make sure it's anchored in truth. After that, it's personal. Does this work in my personal life, right? Of my goals, where I want to go. And then finally, does it work with my family? Does it work one level removed, all the way down to your pets? If what I teach can work in the business, my personal life, and all the way down to my pets, that's anchored in truth. And truth is constant, application changes. Once I know it's anchored in truth, I can come and teach it to people, and I can show them not just how to use it to increase sales in the business or better customer satisfaction scores or whatever it might be. I can teach the same truths to enhance marriages, to enhance spiritual well-being, to enhance physical goals, because the truth is constant, application changes. So the reason why I find companies fail in that is they're presenting what I call a symptomatic solution. Now, symptomatic solution works like this. I have a daughter who's got an extremely rare medical condition. 17th ever to be diagnosed with it. It's a rare mutation. And because of that, her muscles don't work the ways ours do. So she's been in a wheelchair since she's 3. She's 8 now. She's just awesome little girl. But I learned about this concept of symptomatic solutions. So one of the symptomatic solutions that my daughter uses is her wheelchair. Her wheelchair does not solve the problem. It deals with the symptom of the problem. Another way to say this, if you take the wheelchairs out of it, Katie Beth, if I was to break my arm and I come to you and say, Katie, my arm really hurts. Can you give me some pain meds? And the bone is sticking out. You can see it. It's noticeably broken. And you give me some morphine. That's going to take the pain away for about 20 minutes. But what happens is that's a symptomatic solution. What we need to do as leaders is solve for the root cause. How do you find what the root cause is? Ask yourself why 5 times. That's the simplest way to do a root cause analysis. Why? Keep digging deeper as a leader so you understand, okay, it's not that they're unable to doing their job. They are capable of doing their job. Something is stopping them, and it's not their ability. Is it their attitude? Okay, maybe it's their attitude. Actually, it's not their attitude. Okay, so something externally is slowing this person down to the point where I'm about to fire them. Before I fire them, which is an extremely expensive thing to do, and it's not fair to them, I don't think, when we can't lead them effectively. Let me figure out what's going on with Matt. because something's stopping him from performing at the level he needs to be at.
Yeah, that's fascinating and very interesting. I do think it's interesting that you point out the fact that sometimes the problem with our people isn't the people. It's either the structure or it's us as the leaders. And
Yeah.
so that's such an important thing for all of our listeners to really recognize. And I love that you've addressed that with this. In your book, you talk about, so in your book, Motivate the Unmotivated, which I love the title of, you say that it's not that motivation is missing, it's that leaders haven't built us in. I do feel like creating kind of a culture and motivation in some of the offices that we have is very difficult. So talk to us about kind of the overview, give us a sneak peek of what you mean by this and kind of what we can expect from the book.
Yeah, I'd say there's two forms of motivation. There's fear-based motivation and love-based motivation. Fear-based motivation is based on force. Love-based motivation is based off understanding. I ask the question all the time to clients, which one takes longer? And everyone says the same thing. Oh, the love one, getting to know everybody, right? It takes so much longer. And I sit there and go, actually, I didn't say which one causes someone to move faster, because fear and force can get people to move quick.
Right.
The problem is you're going to invest in your people. You either invest up front or you invest. If you look at people who have kids, quote unquote, kids that still live at home that are actually adults, that's a great example of either you invest up front or you invest forever. We need to address these things early. So what takes more time over the lifetime of a relationship? It's fear-based motivation, because you need to be there to motivate them. Love-based motivation, actually, when you're not there, if you see all the what we call motivational all-stars, which we talk about them in the book, people like, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Jesus, Mother Teresa, when they all left, when they were all killed, their motivation actually grew. Versus you look at some of the dictators who used force, what happens when a dictator is removed? Their influence officially is done.
Right.
Now, there's always a little pockets that someone wants the next spot, but in all, the movement's over. So as a leader, we need to take time and understand our people. And when you do that, it actually takes less time over the relationship. So the way we do that is ask 3 questions. Every single week, we call this our pulse check. It's the first 3 questions in that LP planner we have, but it's what are you focused on? What are you grateful for? What are you working towards? If you ask those 3 questions to your people every single week for 4 weeks, you'll start being able to pick up on trends that will let you know when you need to manage, how you need to manage, and who you need to manage versus just randomly picking who's getting mad today. And that's how the majority of us manage. We manage without knowing all the information, and that is a foolish way to live and a dangerous way to manage.
That makes so much sense. That is very wise wisdom. Speaking of wisdom, you learned an important lesson in leadership from a $40 million Craigslist sales team. Mm-hmm. Will you give us a peek behind the curtain and share that lesson with us?
Oh, man. Well, there are a lot of them.
I'm sure that's true.
The one that I would say was the biggest was people actually want structure. They do. Humans, we crave structure. The universe we live in is built on structure and rhythm, and structure brings peace, or structure probably more than peace. Structure brings freedom and rhythm brings peace. So we want that. As humans, we want that. Now, we'll push back, and we had kind of the millennials come in and they told everyone they don't want structure, and now all of a sudden they're going, actually, turns out it's pretty helpful. So we want to bring that whole thing back. And I think that was the biggest thing. What that led to also was that people don't really know what they want. So I can't just take someone's answer on the surface because they haven't really thought about it. So if you were to ask your people, hey, what do you want? The response tends to be something like, oh man, I just need to make some more money. And every study has shown that money is not a motivator. So throw money at it. All you're doing is burning cash, literally. What I'd rather you do is find out, what do they want? What do they care about? For me, we have a nonprofit. We care about that. For me, I have a daughter with special needs. We care about that stuff, right? Faith's a big deal for mine. We care about that stuff. So if you're trying to motivate me, right there, family, faith, and special needs kids helping other families, there's plenty of ways that you can motivate me as a leader if you're willing to think and listen. And unfortunately, or fortunately, there is a prerequisite to be a good leader is you actually have to care. That's it. You can be a great salesperson. Actually, I would even argue you still have to care, but you can be a salesperson and not care about your team, right? Be a very selfish salesperson. You cannot be a selfish manager. It does not work well. Can you get results? Sure, I'm sure you can. Again, like I said, there's been evil and wicked people all throughout the world who have used fear-based motivation to get results, but it has never sustained. Never, not once.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I agree with that. The good leaders, the best leaders I've ever worked with and worked for were all leaders that I felt like truly cared about our mission of our company and also truly cared about our team. And so when you have those things, you're more likely to wake up and do the hard stuff at work that day because you have that sense of love and commitment from the person, the team that you're working with. I love that.
Yeah.
So
That's how humans work.
it is how humans work. It is. So one of the things that you've addressed in some of the other podcasts you've done that I've listened to, and I wanted to address that on this podcast. This is something that some of our Legacy Leaders Network members and some of our listeners really deal with, and that is the issue of burnout. So this is a huge deal. This, I feel like, is rampant across all different industries, but particularly in the industries our Legacy Leaders Network members are in, a lot of estate planning attorneys, a lot of small business owners, a lot of financial advisors. There are a lot of people in these industries that they run their own business. They also do a lot of the work themselves. And so they tend to really struggle with burnout.
Yeah.
It seems like burnout is almost inevitable. What are your thoughts, and do you have any solutions for addressing burnout?
Yeah, your listeners are not going to like me though.
Uh-oh.
But if y'all are attorneys, you guys can argue back. But I'm happy you call me and we can have this discussion, right? Talk to me about law, you'll put me under the table. But this one I have seen time and time again. Burnout is your fault. Period. It is absolutely preventative. It is unfortunate, anyone who gets to it. And it can't be fixed as easily as it can be prevented. So you don't try to fix burnout, prevent it. Now, how do you do that? Well, make sure you're combining intention and structure. The industries you just talked about, when we work with people in the financial industry, in the legal industry, in the services-based industry, the professional industry, I always remind people you're a professional, or you're not a professional offering to be a person. You're a person offering a professional service. And don't differentiate those two, right? You got to bring those together and have it as one understanding. You're a person first offering a service, not a service offering to be a person. So in your situation, the majority of these people, although they might be solo entrepreneurs running a firm of their own, or they have multiples, it doesn't matter the level you are. You're becoming a slave to what it is that you created. Like you're letting it drive you. Oh, Matt, but you don't understand. I can't. No, you can. You just aren't. And this is what we mean by truth-based transformation. See, truth provokes tension. Tension then leads to transformation. We help people make it through the tension. So for some of you right now, you might be here, you might be feeling that tension because I might be speaking directly to you. Where you're stuck is because of what you're refusing to let go of. That's where you're stuck. If you're a good, we'll just say service provider, so I could hit all the ones we just talked about. Every client we have who's a good service provider, they know how to make money. They can make money. But what they do, unfortunately, is they live a life and a pace that is not possible to sustain. Technology has caused us to actually burn out faster, which is weird. It should be the opposite. But the reason why is we've kept the pace up with technology versus letting technology move its pace up to let us slow down. And that's the thing we need to make sure that we are focusing on is slowing down. And I say go from fast to slow, slow to smooth, smooth to fast. That's the process. So for those who are sitting there going, this dude doesn't understand, I'm just burnt out. Go read my book and read chapter 2. You'll get everything I did and how I went to the lowest point I possibly could have been. And how I came back, it was 3 steps. Number 1, it was 7-day planning. 7 days. I couldn't go more than 7. And it turns out we as humans function best when we plan 1 week at a time. The second thing was what I call being a pro, aware, patient, ready, open. I need to be aware of what's going on. I need to be patient. I need to be ready, and I need to be open. The final piece that I want you to focus on is making sure that you are doing what I call filling your buckets. You're pouring into others, you're pouring into yourself, and most importantly, you're letting someone else pour into you. So if they're a client of yours, kudos to them because they're having somebody pour into them. We focus all of this with these high performers. A lot of service providers fall in the trap of being a high performer. High performance is the thing that's crushing good people. A high performer is high output, unsustainable pace compared to others. What we teach is optimal performance. Same high output. We do not sacrifice results. Same high output at a sustainable pace compared to one's own abilities. So what we do is twice a year. The next one, I don't know when this is going to be published, but January 22nd, 23rd, we do our Realign conference. So it's what we call a complete conference, which means there's 4 parts to it. Great content coming from the stage, a great audience that's worth meeting, custom 90-day plan for every person to leave with, and then access to all the tools moving forward. We do this with executives, entrepreneurs, and professional athletes, the highest level of performers come in. And what we do is we take their system, and it's not to motivate someone. It's not to reignite someone, although it will. It is to recalibrate them, realign them so they can go from high performance to optimal performance. And that's what we focus on with all of our clients when it comes to burnout. So I'll go back to what I said before. Burnout is your fault. And it is much easier to prevent than it is to repair.
But there is a solution to repair it in the event you're listening and there is burnout. It just may not be the answer that we all wanted to hear, but definitely wise words of wisdom. Okay, I have 2 final questions for you, and thank you for letting me pick your brain.
Yep.
You've worked with leaders from all different levels, big companies, small companies. So talk to me about if you had to say the number 1 most common issue that you see among high performing leaders, what is the biggest mistake they make?
Oh, the biggest mistake they make is they overestimate how good they are and they underestimate the amount of time something takes. So they overestimate self, underestimate workload. So they think they can do it faster and they think they need to do less work. So therefore they think they could do something that takes an hour and 25 minutes. It ends up taking an hour. Now their whole day is out of whack. So they don't create margin. So they mismanage their margin would probably be the better way to say that specific one. The other underlining issue that I think a lot of leaders aren't realizing is the currency of availability, right? So the currency of availability works like this. We need to be made available and we need to be focusing on being available in the things that we're working on. So it doesn't matter how much money you make, doesn't matter how big your business is, doesn't matter how many clients you have. If you're not available to be used for the calling you have, you're a slave to your own life. So I would challenge everybody, just focus on the concept. Are you available to do what life is calling you? That doesn't mean go quit everything and go live in a van. If you want to do that, go for it. That's not my thing. But in reality, are you available? And I want you to recognize the best currency that will lead to a fulfilled life is a currency of availability. And that means you can work your whole life. That's why you have some of the happiest people in the world living, all over the place at all different levels of economic scale, and has nothing to do with their happiness. But the ones who actually have availability to be with friends, to live a fulfilled life, they live the longest and they're the healthiest the entire way.
That was a good answer. That was good. That gives me a lot to think about, Matt. Okay, final question for you.
Yeah.
So this may be the hardest one I've asked you so far.
Okay.
Okay. So through the work that you're doing with growing this company, all of these leaders that you've impacted, and then, as your own life as a husband and as a father, what is it you hope your legacy will be?
So my legacy will strictly be for my kids. I don't necessarily care outside of that. And I genuinely mean that. I would want my kids to see me as a man of faith who lives as non-hypocritical of a life as I possibly can, who understands my own weakness and is able to acknowledge it so that my kids don't think I'm something I'm not. So here's a great example. My daughter, Natalie, we've had a couple really major scares. One time she actually passed away for 20 minutes and nothing less than the grace of God came back perfectly fine. And I remember as I was in the hospital room waiting for her to recover from this whole thing, I just had this image in my head of seeing myself at her funeral. And it was me, my wife, my two sons, and obviously her casket. And I'm looking at myself and I'm seeing me. And all I keep seeing is I'm standing there kind of stoic because I'm just doing what dudes do, right? No emotion, just be, which tends to be how I respond to things, right? So it's not necessarily me being fake or holding anything back. But I look at my wife and she's heartbroken and you could see it. And then I look at my son, Zig, and he's looking up at me, trying not to cry because he's seeing dad do it a way that's not actually what's happening inside. And that reality of the authenticity of the legacy we're trying to live, that's what I want. I want when my kids give my eulogy that they're talking about the right person. So I don't know if that's a sexy answer. I don't care how much money we have, how much money we give. I'd love to make impact. Honestly, my goal here is to share who God is with as many people as possible, let them understand who Jesus is and move forward. And if my kids see that legacy of a Christ-filled life of what their dad lived, and they can sit there and go, no, that's the same guy who's on stage, who I see at home, who's in bed before we go to bed. That's the legacy I'd want to live because that's a generational legacy. I'd rather the example I am live longer than my name.
Absolutely. No, that's a great answer to the question. I told you it's a deep thought question.
Hey,
and I love that you have clarity around your legacy. It's obviously something you put a lot of thought into and that you're actively working towards. So I commend you for that. Well, for our listeners, this has been the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Katie Beth Hand. And my guest today was Matt Granados. And to connect with Matt, you can find him at lifepulseinc.com. And you can find things specific to what we talked about today at lifepulseinc.com/LL. He's also on all major socials, and we will link those in the show notes for you. And Matt, thank you so much for jumping on so that I could pick your brain today and ask you all of my questions.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Katie Beth.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.